Achtung, and welcome to A Picture Paints 1,000 Words, in which James Holland and I go through some of our favourite images of the Second World War and see what they tell us. And James, what have you got for us today?
Well, I've got a picture of a whole load of horses, blokes on them, a field kitchen unit, and if I told most people that this was dated about 1882, somewhere in England or northern France or something, I think most people would not really have any cause to question that.
Franco-Prussian War, innit?
Might be a little bit later than that. In actual fact, it's June 1940. And this comes from a private collection. Some guy in a German artillery unit from the early part of the war, and it was a whole bunch of them. I bought a whole load of them. It's one photo album's worth, effectively. Wow. And this was one of them, and I was really struck when I first saw it, by kind of how lean the horses are.
Yes,
one of them you can see his ribs.
That one on the left is particularly skinny nag, isn't it?
Yeah, but of course you can tell this is a private photograph because the Germans didn't show photos like this publicly. They showed photos of half-tracks and panzers and motorbikes with sidecars and screaming Stukas and all the rest of it and people looking kind of mean. They didn't have people looking really, really, really old-fashioned and 19th century. Yeah. And I think this is a very, very revealing picture because it shows that for all the modernity of the German army in the Blitzkrieg years, there was an awful lot of it which actually wasn't modern at all and was actually a throwback to the 19th century. And this absolutely proves the point.
But if you're
and there was something like, I think they used 1 million horses in the First World War and 3 million in the Second World War.
My God. I suppose that the advantage of horses over a truck is if you're in a tight spot, you can't eat your truck.
Yeah, but the other problem with them is they do both need fuel, and it's all very well you can sort of park them up for the night in a field, I suppose, in summer, but they also need hay and all the rest of it throughout the year. They need looking after, and it's also interesting that in the kind of the Reibert, which I think we've talked about before on the podcast, there's a big section at the end of it about horses and how you deal with them, which underlines just what a completely important part to the German armed forces, or particularly the army, of course, horses were in the Second World War.
But it's a sort of an example of Germany at the time having 20th century aspirations and a 19th century base from which to launch them.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there's a whole load of pictures in this whole collection. There's other photographs of them kind of, going through towns, crossing bridges and all the rest of it with their horses and towing their guns and all the rest of it. But this is the one that kind of, really, really struck me. It just felt as though it was from a completely different era before the Second World War, not actually at the height of one of the Germans' greatest victories.